This is a pretty important product because this is the first product that even begins to compete against the RunCam Eagle, which is, in my opinion, the very best FPV camera that we have today. Now, all FPV cameras are pretty crappy, but by our standards in our field, the RunCam Eagle, in my opinion, is one of the best cameras, or if it is the best camera to me, because it just has a mechanical advantage over every other camera that is not in its class. It has a much larger sensor, it has a much wider aperture on its lens. It's overall just a higher spec product than any other FPV camera that is currently popular on the market. And the Caddx Ratel, whatever, has that same very large sensor. The lens is a little bit different, but it has that same very large sensor, and that's what makes these two cameras very special and stand out among all other cameras. Now, if you watched my previous or a couple other videos ago about how to choose an FPV camera, you know that I really like these large sensor cameras, and I also like the CCD cameras. The small CMOS sensor cameras like the Predator or the Sparrow are fine. However, in a variety of lighting situations, the CCD tends to do better than the CMOS sensors. However, the CMOS sensors do tend to have high resolution. Go watch that video if you want to know more about all that. Let's focus on these two cameras, and this is going to be more of an initial look at the Ratel, whatever, because there are a couple of aspects of it that are going to change, and they really just released a semi-unfinished product because, hey, that's what China loves to do. So the lens on this camera will most likely change. I'm actually probably going to say it's probably not going to change, and I bet nothing about this camera is actually going to change because these companies don't really update anything along the way. They say they will, but they really don't. However, they say that they are going to come out with a new lens for the camera, and it is going to be a lot better. And they might make some firmware tweaks as well, based on some recommendations I made. But let's go over the physical structure of these two cameras first. So the most notable physical difference between these two cameras to me is that the Caddx camera is 1 gram lighter, a full gram lighter. It has all the same stuff in it, does all the same things, it's just a full gram lighter, but that gram is probably entirely in the lens and not at all in the camera, because the camera is actually a little bit beefier. So if you take a good look at them, you see that the camera on the the Caddx is 1 millimeter smaller than the Eagle, and that's more probably because of the rim around the lens rather than anything else. Another very interesting physical aspect is that you'll notice that the screw location, the mounting screw location on the Caddx is a little bit more, it's just in a different spot. It's a little bit more forward than the Eagle, and you can see that, well, if I line it up correctly, the overall length of the lens, how far it sticks out from that screw hole, is about the same. The Caddx has a much more convex lens on it, so it does stick out a little bit further. I really don't think that's going to make it easier to hit, but this is an interesting distinction that the Caddx camera is overall just smaller front to back, from the back of the camera to the top of the lens. Other physical attributes, the Caddx camera is maybe 0.2 of a millimeter narrower as well, so it actually fits easier between tight standoffs if you are pushing it between tight standoffs. And yeah, that's about the only physical difference between these two cameras. Thankfully, they use the same pinout, so they're just interchangeable. They use the same crappy plastic backing, which I'm not a huge fan of. Another physical aspect is that the RunCam has this nice seal around the edge to hold on the whole housing, whereas the Caddx, you can probably take the housing completely off because it's just held together, or it has this rubber or foam seal around it to keep the light out. One aspect that I really would like to see changed about these cameras is that nobody takes apart their camera, and if they are, they're trying to repair it because it's completely broken. So it would be really nice if these companies just got rid of these stupid plastic backings and just encased the entire camera in resin. And that's because when the camera is at an angle and you crash, the camera sometimes gets knocked up against the bottom of the frame, and then you knock off components off the camera, and like one cap knocked off pretty much breaks the camera entirely, which is just very annoying. You can definitely see that they are large sensors by comparison. I didn't bring out another camera to compare against, but Side by side, they are actually both the same aspect ratio. I've tried measuring it very closely. The stuff around the sensor makes it kind of wonky to see, but it's actually that little frosted center area that's the actual sensor, and that's the difference. And you'll also notice something very special. Both of these cameras have a true, or at least very close to, 16:9 aspect ratio. I have no idea why they actually are in a 16:9 aspect ratio. I don't believe that either company developed these sensors or the whole camera for FPV. They probably just borrowed it from another industry and just kind of slapped it together and changed the firmware to make it work for FPV. And that's probably why they're both 16:9 sensors, because in FPV a 4:3 aspect ratio makes a whole lot more sense than 16:9, because we need that vertical field of view. And even though me myself, which I'm very particular about the things that I personally use on a regular basis, I run 16:9 goggles, and I still view my camera in 4:3 because, for some reasons, but I have found that I much prefer 4:3 regardless of the aspect ratio of my goggle screen. And I really wish that these two sensors, that these two cameras would come out in a 4:3 aspect. And that's because both of these sensors are 1 by 1.8 inch, which is larger than half an inch. And that's pretty big, because a GoPro, by comparison, the very best GoPro has a smaller sensor than both of these cameras. I'm pretty sure even the Hero 7, I'm pretty sure has it does have a smaller sensor than both of these cameras, which is actually saying a lot. There's a lot of aspects of photography that have to do with the sensor size. I'm not going to get into any of that, but I'm going to say that if these sensors were a half inch in a 4:3 aspect, the sensor area that's used would be larger, because when you run these cameras in a 4:3 aspect, they're essentially just cropping the lateral aspects of the sensor, which means that you are not getting the advantage of using the entire sensor. So if Foxeer wants to make a camera, this is a huge hint, but of course they love not listening to logic, so we'll see what happens when they come out with their half-inch sensor, which they will come out with one. They've told me that they've been working on one for a long time, and then they sent me one that they thought was a half-inch, and it was actually not a half-inch. I'll get into that later. Anyways, you can see they're the sensor sizes. They're very similar. Now let's take a look at the lenses. And the lenses is where things kind of fall flat on the face for the Caddx camera. As you can see, let's put it so it's on the left side and the right side. As you can see, that hole of the lens on the right side is much, much bigger than the hole of the lens on the left side. The lens on the left side is from the Caddx, the lens on the right side is from the Eagle, and logic will tell you a bigger window to the world is going to let in more light, and you're going to be able to see more stuff. Now, that's not totally true. In reality, the way photography works is that actually having a very small aperture can give you a whole lot of sharpness and can actually give you great clarity if the glass quality is really good. However, what the larger aperture does is it lets in a whole lot more light, and that means that you can run in lower lighting settings. It does compress your field of view. However, in the sharp zone of the field of view, it is going to be sharper. Again, this is all based on the glass quality and the way the lens is made. There are a lot of factors in play here, so just by opening the aperture on this lens, on the Caddx lens, does not necessarily mean the lens is going to get better. It's based completely on the quality of the lens, how it's been engineered, how it's made, and this is the one aspect that they tell me that they are going to improve or change, is that they're looking for a lens that's going to have a wider aperture, which I'm very welcoming for, because even though the RunCam has this very wide aperture, this is still pretty small aperture by comparison to, you know, high-end cameras that have low aperture numbers and give you a really nice depth of field. The depth of field of the Eagle is still plenty wide. It's probably about 30 feet wide, so you have no issues with focus or blurriness. However, if you do focus it to infinity, the things in the foreground will be blurry. So yeah, it's pretty much a toss-up at this point. Maybe they'll give us a lens with a wider aperture that will give us better clarity. And I'll talk about the visual experience of using these two cameras in a minute, but this is one aspect that is challenging. This is probably the most challenging aspect of these cameras, is to find the appropriate lens for the sensor that you're using. I'm not going to tell you which camera is which until the very end. I want you to make up your own mind and really just watch the footage. Don't be worried. Don't be too worried about the fact that they're not exactly the same. Just watch them and see which video feed you prefer. A big disclaimer about DVR video feeds: this is directly from my goggles. That's pretty much the jankiest way to represent DVR footage or camera quality footage possible. However, it is somewhat good enough to somewhat tell the difference. As I've said in the past, and I'll say again, the one and only person I have ever seen to be able to reproduce the same or better recording quality as what you see real time in your goggles is RC Shim. I urge you to check out his channel, especially for his FPV camera reviews. There is literally not a single other reviewer or person out there that has been able to demonstrate this level of recording quality. Again, what I'm showing you is not final, and you can't really compare DVR footage between different camera classes. Now, I've distinctively made separate classes. One is the small sensor CCD class, one is the small sensor CMOS class, and one is the large sensor CMOS classes. All of these kinds of sensors have very, very different attributes and different qualities. You can't just look at, you know, a light dark scene and then some other scene and say, okay, no, I like this one better, I like that one better. And you can't compare them through DVR for a number of reasons. The first reason of which is the same reason why you can't really compare these two cameras to one another with respect to resolution, because the resolution of the DVR footage is so low that you can't see the clarity of these two cameras with respect to the resolution. Now, there's other clarity aspects I'm going to talk about, but straight resolution, you can't tell a difference. Now, on the same note as resolution, I would say that you also can't really see much pixel shimmer in DVR footage. Cameras like the RunCam Eagle and other RunCam cameras actually, and the Predator does this a little bit as well, has this weird pixel shimmer, pixel explosion effect that bothers a lot of people, and they just cannot tolerate CMOS sensors because of that weird pixel shimmery kind of effect. The Caddx camera, by comparison, has essentially no pixel shimmer, which is really a shock to me because pretty much every other CMOS sensor camera out there in FPV has that weird pixel shimmer effect, at least to some degree. If you turn up the sharpness on the Caddx camera, which you're not going to do because it looks awful, it will have some pixel shimmer, but it actually won't be even remotely as bad as the RunCam, even on just level 1. The RunCam, I run the sharpness setting on level 1 on both. There's two sharpness settings. Both of them are level 1 on my camera. I have adjusted both of these cameras to be optimal for what I see in my goggles. And so that's about the resolution. You really can't judge resolution. Both of them have really good resolution, and I would make a comment about the field of view. The field of view on the Caddx camera is slightly wider, ever so slightly wider than the RunCam Eagle, and that actually does help quite a bit. And even though it has that slightly wider field of view, which means that all the stuff on screen should be more compressed, it actually has a higher resolution looking picture. I think because it does not have that pixel shimmer effect, it's actually a much smoother picture. So it does look higher resolution. Again, everything I just said you cannot see through this DVR footage. You really just have to see it firsthand, or hopefully RC Shim comes out with a review and he compares the two, and you could definitely see it in his video. The next thing, which is the next most important thing to me, or is the most important thing in general, is the clarity of the camera. So it's really hard to distinguish the clarity, again, through DVR footage. However, my personal experience viewing these two cameras, flying with these two cameras across multiple lighting situations, the RunCam just has better clarity. You have better edge contrast and you have better general contrast. I'm not going to go over the difference between those two. It's kind of a more TV photography quality. However, in the Caddx camera, everything kind of looks more monotone, looks more gray. And again, I have adjusted the settings as best I can to account for all these issues. And the Caddx just has a little bit more of a kind of not screen door, that's a bad word, that's another effect. It looks like you're looking through a little bit of smoke or some cloudiness, just a hair more than the RunCam camera. The RunCam does have slightly more clarity. However, their overall contrast is about the same. The RunCam does have slightly better overall contrast than the Caddx. However, the edge contrast of the Micro Eagle is quite a bit better. Again, the Micro Eagle has that weird pixel shimmer, which does hurt its resolution and clarity a little bit. Those are really the two most important aspects. Other important aspects that you might think are important that I don't really care for is that the colors on the RunCam are just more natural, look better. It doesn't really matter to me. The Caddx camera does have more HDR quality, and that is also contributing to the low cloudy, clarity-ish look of the camera. I do wish that they had an HDR slider, like settings 1 through 5, so that you can just set it to whatever level that you want. The RunCam does actually have is it HDR? Well, the RunCam doesn't have HDR. It has WDR, wide dynamic range. The Caddx actually has HDR. It's manipulating the picture to be different, while the RunCam is just kind of manipulating light dark contrast stuff to adjust with that. I prefer the RunCam just because it just looks like a more the RunCam HDR, WDR quality, just because it looks a little more natural. But again, like I said, this is really an insignificant feature. Like, it's not even worth discussing because it doesn't matter. Colors are colors. Whatever you look at is whatever you look at. It is in color. You can tell color differences between objects, and that's really all that matters. Now, the problems with these two cameras. Starting with the RunCam, the number one problem with the RunCam is this incredibly bad whiteout effect, and everybody that has one of these cameras knows about this whiteout effects because they've experienced it a couple times. Now, I don't have a good example of it because I've just gotten used to avoiding it, but what the whiteout effect is, if you're going from a really dark area to a really light area really quickly, or if you're doing a roll and a flip and the sun just happens to arc through your FPV feed, your camera goes 100% white. You are 100% blind for 2 to 3 seconds, and that is absolutely terrifying. There's nothing less safe than being blinded during your flight. It's just awful. And the worst part about all this is that RunCam doesn't seem to want to even acknowledge the fact that this problem exists, let alone do anything to solve the problem. Now, there is a way to avoid that problem. However, it involves changing a setting in the camera which turns off your wide dynamic range, which is not something you want to do because that's one of the best attributes of the camera. So essentially, this whiteout effect or issue is ingrained in the camera, and you can't do anything about it with any of the RunCam Eagles that you are buying currently today. Other issues with the RunCam are the lens could have a slightly wider field of view, just slightly wider field of view. The pixel shimmer I've already discussed extensively. That's about it. There really aren't any other issues with the camera. The settings, the amount of settings in there are pretty much great. Oh yeah, one other thing. The latency on the camera is higher than the Caddx camera. Apparently it's like twice as high. It's like 50 to 60 milliseconds. Whatever it is, I haven't had a problem flying it. I can see it being somewhat of an issue for racing because you are going really, really, really stupid fast today in racing. So you do definitely need the lowest latency gear you can find. I haven't had an issue with it. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. If you are a person that has an issue with it, you already know that you have an issue with it. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry about it at all. It's not even worth discussing. However, the Caddx camera does have a much lower latency, or so they tell me, or so it says in the product description. I don't know. I don't have any apparatus to set up for testing that. But now let's go to the problems with the Caddx camera. And the number one glaring problem with Caddx, which is a problem with a lot of things in the FPV industry, is quality control. Now, this may just be my experience, and I'm telling you, this really may just be my experience. Every single Caddx FPV camera, not their turtles or splits or any of that, or any of the other stuff, specifically their FPV cameras, every single FPV camera I have had has had issues and just died. All but I think 1 or 2 that I ended up like selling, or I think I lost one quad that had a Caddx camera on it, and then another one I just sold or gave away to somebody else. The rest of the cameras that I've had have eventually failed on me. They just glitch out, stop working out right, and it's awful. And if Caddx has not fixed their quality control, this camera is essentially totally dead. And we won't even know if they have fixed it until they start shipping them. We start seeing what people say, what thousands of people say when they start getting them and flying them. The other issue that I had with this camera which it may be a quality control issue. It may just be my camera. I've flown this camera for maybe 30 or 40 packs now. I had 2 instances where my video feed froze, just froze. Now, this is the same quad I have been flying for the past several months with the RunCam Eagle. I have not had a single issue, and the fact that the video froze as if your computer screen just froze, like I could still see it's just a frozen picture, is indicative of the camera actually freezing, not my video transmitter freezing or the flight controller doing something with the video. I'm pretty confident it is the camera that froze, and it happened to me twice, and when it did freeze, it was totally frozen, and I crashed, and everything reset, like the camera reset. So I don't know what that was. I don't even have a DVR example of it, because the one time that it froze, it wasn't recording, and the second time that it froze, I deleted my memory card. I haven't had it happen since, but if that's an issue, then hey, it's even worse than the whiteout effect in the RunCam, because at least the whiteout effect comes back to you. Other issues with the Caddx, they really do need to put like a color tint option. I would like to see a HDR slider in the settings options. That would be wonderful. The lens, the field of view of the lens is perfect. It is absolutely perfect. The lens, however, could use a wider aperture. Now, one thing I haven't discussed is the low light quality of these 2 cameras, and I don't even think it's worth discussing more than saying these 2 cameras are better than any other camera on the market, because any other camera that's popular on the market, because they both have huge sensors and they both have the ability to cope with lower light settings than any other camera, and they both do a fantastic job of low light, regardless of the small aperture of the Caddx, which it could do better if it had a wider aperture. They do better than any other camera, and once it gets too dark to actually fly, then, once it gets too dark to even be out flying, then these cameras don't work. Like, it's to the point where if there is enough light at all to fly anywhere, these cameras perform admirably. If it's just pitch black and too dark, there's no camera that's going to work, so these cameras will not work. So in that respect, I would say it's not even worth reviewing or discussing the low light potential of these cameras, because they're both equally excellent, and they both blow the doors off anything else that has a smaller sensor than them. Now, the very end, which camera do I personally prefer, and which camera do I like? Which camera do I recommend? Honestly, I'd say none of them. They both suck, because everything in our industry is still pretty bad. However, if the Caddx camera doesn't fail on me in the long term and doesn't give me issues, even in its current state, with its lens that is not optimal and the firmware that doesn't have the settings that it should have, I would prefer the Caddx camera over the Micro Eagle, and that's saying a whole lot. However, because I have been running the Micro Eagle for probably well over a year, and I have not had a single quality control issue with the camera, aside from like some weird something or other was broken right from the get-go. I mean, that's a reliability record that is yet to be met, and I am really afraid that Caddx cameras, I mean, I'm worried that we're going to start seeing failures and things that people say, that issues that they're having, and I really hope not, because this is a great competitor to the RunCam, and the fact that it doesn't have the pixel shimmer, a wider field of view, and a better looking picture, as in a higher resolution looking picture, I would prefer the Caddx. But yeah, it's really a toss-up. You can't go wrong with either camera, and something you may have noticed is I put the lenses on the wrong cameras. So yeah, I hope this was really helpful. I'm gonna redo this video a little bit later if the lens improves. However, I have a hard time believing that it's actually going to improve, because like many of these companies have told me, oh, this is a prototype, we're going to improve it, we're going to make it better, and then they just release the same crap that they just sent me for review. Even though I told them all this stuff that was wrong with it, they do nothing about it. I don't know why they don't listen to anybody. Like, it's not just me telling them this stuff. There's many people, like the whiteout effect of RunCam. There's thousands of people out there that have told. It's just like, it just eats me up inside that these companies just don't want to do things as good as they could be? How much effort would it take them to fix this little tiny aspect? Or how much effort would it have taken Caddx to just search for a lens that has that wider aperture, that matches the sensor better, or just make a lens? How much does it cost to make a lens in China? I have made lenses in China. I've made other dental products, and I've made a couple of lenses. It costs about $3,300 to make a glass lens mold. That's nothing, especially for China, where it probably costs them a tenth of that price. Like, why don't they put a little bit more effort into these things to get them right? It's just frustrating, and I still dream of one day having control of one of these companies so I can actually make really good stuff. Anyways, that was my rant at the very end. I hope this was helpful. Please floss your teeth. It is more important than brushing. Promise. Take care. Bye-bye.